Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge and watched the stars through the main screen. The ship moved slowly through space near the edge of human territory. It was a routine mission to map new star systems and look for planets that humans could live on someday. Jake had done this job for 10 years and liked the quiet peace of deep space. "Captain, we're getting close to the Kepler system," said Lisa Carter from her seat at the navigation controls. Lisa had been with Jake's crew for 5 years and was the best navigator in the Outer Rim fleet. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as she checked their position. "Good work, Lisa," Jake replied. "Tony, how are the engines running?" Tony Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station with a smile. "Everything looks perfect, Captain. The new fusion drive is working better than expected. We could probably make the trip back to Earth in half the time it took to get here." Amy Walsh sat at the science station studying data from their sensors. She was a xenobiologist who studied alien life forms. So far, humans had only met 2 alien species, and both were friendly traders. Amy hoped to find signs of more alien life during their mission. "I'm picking up some strange readings from the 4th planet in this system," Amy said. "The atmosphere looks like it could support human life, but there's something else. I think there might be ruins of some kind of civilization down there." Jake felt excited. Finding evidence of alien civilizations was rare and important. "Can you tell if anyone still lives there?" Amy shook her head. "The readings are too weak. We'd need to get closer or send a probe down to the surface to know for sure." Before Jake could give orders, the ship's communication system started beeping with an urgent message. Lisa quickly opened the channel and Admiral Kevin Blake's face appeared on the screen. Blake was the head of Earth's Space Defense Forces and based on Luna, Earth's moon. "Captain Morrison, I need you to return to Earth immediately," Blake said. His face looked worried and tired. "We've received intelligence about a possible threat to human space. All exploration ships are being recalled." Jake felt surprised. In 40 years since humans had learned to travel faster than light, there had never been a serious threat from alien species. "What kind of threat, Admiral?" "The kind that could end human civilization," Blake replied grimly. "I can't say more over this channel. Get back to Earth as fast as your ship can fly. That's an order." The communication ended, and Jake's crew looked at each other with concern. Tony started preparing the ship to jump to faster than light speed, while Lisa plotted the quickest course back to Earth. Amy gathered all the data they had collected during their mission. The trip back to Earth took 3 days. When they arrived in the solar system, Jake was shocked by what he saw. Hundreds of human ships were gathering near Luna and Earth. Military vessels that Jake had never seen before were arriving from all the human colonies. The usually quiet space around Earth looked like preparation for a war. The Horizon's Edge docked at Luna Base, and Jake went directly to Admiral Blake's office. The Admiral looked like he had not slept in days. Maps of the galaxy covered the walls, and dozens of officers were working at computer stations. "Jake, thank you for coming back so quickly," Blake said. "What I'm about to tell you is classified, at the highest level. 3 weeks ago, our long-range sensors detected a massive fleet moving toward human space. The fleet belongs to something called the Hegemony." Jake had never heard that name before. "Who are they?" "They're a military empire that controls about 30% of the galaxy," Blake explained. "According to the information we've gathered, they've conquered dozens of alien species over the past 1,000 years. Their philosophy is simple: destroy any species that might become a threat before they get too powerful." "And they think humans are a threat?" Jake asked. Blake nodded. Our rapid expansion into new star systems has gotten their attention. In just 40 years, we've established colonies in 12 systems. Most alien species take centuries to expand that far. The hegemony sees us as a future rival that needs to be eliminated. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How big is their fleet? Over 10,000 ships, Blake said quietly. Each of their main battleships is the size of a city. We have about 300 military vessels total, and most of those are small patrol ships and transports. The numbers seemed impossible. How could humanity fight an enemy with such overwhelming power? What's our plan? We're going to make them pay for every inch of space they take, Blake said with determination. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable than theirs. Our crews are trained to think independently instead of just following orders. We have some advantages, but I won't lie to you. This is going to be the fight of our lives. Blake showed Jake a holographic display of the hegemony fleet. The alien ships were massive and angular, designed to intimidate as much as to fight. Their weapons could destroy a human ship with a single shot. Their armor was thick enough to resist most human weapons. We estimate they'll reach Earth in 2 weeks, Blake continued. Every human ship that can fight will be here. We're also evacuating civilians from Luna and the orbital stations. If we lose this battle, Earth might be the only human world left. Jake thought about his crew and all the humans living peacefully on Earth and the colonies. The idea that an alien empire could destroy everything humans had built made him angry. What do you want me and my crew to do? The Horizon's edge is fast and has good sensors, Blake replied. I want you to take a position on the edge of the solar system and watch for the enemy fleet. When they arrive, you'll be our early warning system. After that, you'll join the main battle. Jake saluted. We'll be ready, Admiral. As Jake walked back to his ship, he thought about how quickly everything had changed. A week ago, the biggest concern was mapping new star systems. Now, humanity faced extinction from an enemy they had never even heard of. When he told his crew about the situation, they reacted with shock and determination. Lisa immediately started planning patrol routes around the solar system. Tony began modifying the ship's engines for better speed and maneuverability in combat. Amy started studying the intelligence data about hegemony technology and biology. Captain, Amy said after reading the files, according to this data, the hegemony has never been defeated in battle. They've destroyed entire civilizations without losing more than a few ships. Then we'll be the first to prove they can be beaten, Jake replied. 2 days later, the Horizon's Edge took position at the edge of the solar system, along with several other scout ships. Behind them, the combined human fleet waited near Earth and Luna. Jake watched the empty space through his ship's sensors and wondered if humanity was about to face its final battle. The hegemony had conquered dozens of species and controlled thousands of worlds. They had weapons and ships that made human technology look primitive. Their soldiers had fought and won countless battles across the galaxy, but they had never fought humans before. They didn't know about human stubbornness, creativity, and refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. The aliens thought they were coming to destroy another weak species. They were about to learn that humans don't go down without a fight. The hegemony fleet appeared without warning. One moment space was empty, and the next moment it was filled with thousands of alien ships. Jake Morrison watched in horror from the bridge of the Horizon's Edge as the massive vessels emerged from hyperspace jumps all around the solar system. "My God," Lisa Carter whispered from her navigation station. "They're everywhere." The hegemony dreadnoughts were larger than anything humans had ever built. Each one stretched for miles and bristled with weapons. Smaller ships swarmed around, them like insects around giants. The entire fleet moved with perfect coordination toward Earth. "Get me Admiral Blake," Jake ordered. The communication came through immediately. "Admiral, the hegemony fleet has arrived," Jake reported. "I count over 10,000 ships. The largest ones are bigger than our space stations." "Understood, Captain," Blake replied grimly. "Fall back to Earth and join the defense fleet. All ships. This is Admiral Blake. The enemy has arrived. Fight with everything you have. Protect Earth at all costs." The horizon's edge raced toward Earth as the hegemony fleet spread out across the solar system. Jake could see Luna Base in the distance, surrounded by the small human defense fleet. The difference in size was shocking. Human ships looked like toys compared to the alien dreadnoughts. The battle began when the hegemony ships fired their main weapons. Beams of energy reached across space and struck Luna's orbital defense platforms. The human installations exploded in brilliant flashes of light. In less than 5 minutes, Luna's defenses were completely destroyed. "They're targeting the military bases first," Amy Walsh observed from her science station. "They want to eliminate our command structure." Colonel Ryan Murphy's voice came over the fleet communication channel. Murphy commanded the human space fighters and was leading the defense of Earth orbit. "All fighters, attack pattern Delta, hit them fast and get out. Don't try to fight their big ships directly." Jake watched as hundreds of human fighters swarmed toward the hegemony fleet. Small ships moved quickly between the massive alien vessels, firing missiles and energy weapons. Some fighters were destroyed by the alien defenses, but others managed to damage important systems on the enemy ships. "Captain," Tony Rodriguez called from the engineering station, "I have an idea. These alien ships are huge, which means they probably can't turn very fast. If we could get several ships to attack the same target from different directions at the same time, we might be able to overwhelm their defenses." Jake nodded. "Contact the other ships in our group. Tell them we're going to try coordinated attacks." The Horizon's Edge joined with 5 other human ships to attack a hegemony cruiser. The alien ship was 10 times larger than any human vessel, but when all 6 ships attacked from different angles at once, its weapons couldn't target all of them effectively. The coordinated attack damaged the cruiser's engines and left it drifting. In space. "It worked!" Lisa shouted with excitement. "We actually hurt one of their big ships." But the success was temporary. More hegemony ships were arriving every minute, and the human fleet was taking heavy losses. Jake could see dozens of human ships burning in space. The aliens seemed to have unlimited numbers, while humanity's small fleet was being destroyed piece by piece. That's when Amy Walsh made a discovery that changed everything. She had been studying the sensor readings from the alien ships and noticed something strange. "Captain, I think all their ships are controlled by the same computer system," Amy said excitedly. "The way they move and coordinate their attacks. It's too perfect to be individual commanders. They're using some kind of central artificial intelligence to control the entire fleet." "Can we do anything with that information?" Jake asked. Before Amy could answer, Tony Rodriguez jumped up from his station. "Yes. If they're all connected to the same network, we might be able to get into their computer system. We'd need someone who really knows computers, though." Jake immediately thought of Sam Johnson. Sam was a civilian programmer who worked on Earth's computer networks. He was also one of the best hackers in human space, though that wasn't officially on his record. "Lisa, get me a direct line to Earth," Jake ordered. "I need to talk to Sam Johnson in the New York Computer Center." It took several minutes to establish the connection while the battle raged around them. Finally, Sam's face appeared on the communication screen. He looked confused and frightened by the sounds of explosions and alarms in the background. "Jake? What's happening up there?" Sam asked. "We're fighting for our lives, Sam. I need your help. Can you hack into an alien computer network if we can? Get you access to it?" Sam's eyes widened. "I can try, but I'd need direct access to their system somehow." "Leave that to us," Jake replied. "Tony, can we capture one of their communication signals?" "Already working on it, Captain," Tony said. His fingers flew over the engineering controls as he tried to tap into the alien network. "I think I can piggyback our signal onto one of their transmissions, but it will only work for a few minutes before they detect us." "That might be enough," Amy said. "If Sam can plant a virus in their central computer, it could spread to all their ships before they can stop it." Jake made the decision. "Do it. Sam, get ready to hack into the most advanced computer system in the galaxy." For the next hour, the human fleet fought desperately while Sam worked to break into the hegemony network. More human ships were destroyed, but the survivors kept fighting with increasing desperation. They all knew that if Sam failed, Earth would fall. Maria Santos, who led the programming team helping Sam, reported their progress over the communication channel. "We're in their outer security systems, but their main network is heavily protected. We need more time." Time was something they didn't have. The hegemony fleet was moving closer to Earth, and the human defense fleet was down to less than 100 ships. Admiral Blake ordered all remaining ships to form a final defensive line around Earth itself. Then Sam shouted in triumph, "I'm in! I found their central control system. It's incredible! One artificial intelligence is controlling every ship in their fleet. I'm uploading a virus now." "What will the virus do?" Jake asked. "It's going to make their AI think that every hegemony ship is actually a human ship," Sam explained. "Their own fleet will start attacking itself." The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the solar system, hegemony ships suddenly turned their weapons on each other. The massive dreadnoughts, which had seemed invincible moments before, began destroying their own support vessels. The perfect coordination that had made the alien fleet so dangerous became its weakness as ships followed the corrupted orders from their central computer. "It's working," Colonel Murphy reported from his fighter. "They're shooting at each other. All human ships, stay clear and let them destroy themselves." Jake watched in amazement as the mighty hegemony fleet tore itself apart. Ships that could have easily destroyed Earth were now firing desperately at their own allies. The artificial intelligence that controlled them couldn't understand what was happening and kept issuing contradictory orders. Within 2 hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had been reduced to burning wreckage floating around Earth. Some hegemony ships managed to escape by shutting down their connections to the central network, but most of the fleet was destroyed. The humans had won, but the victory felt surreal. A few hours ago, they had faced certain defeat against an enemy with vastly superior technology and numbers. Now that same enemy was debris in space, defeated not by superior weapons, but by human cleverness and determination. Admiral Blake, too. "All ships," came the announcement over the fleet communication. "The enemy fleet has been destroyed. Earth is safe. I want a full damage report from all surviving vessels and prepare for search and rescue operations for any survivors." Jake looked around his bridge at his exhausted crew. Lisa was crying with relief while Tony was laughing and shaking his head in disbelief. Amy was already studying the wreckage of alien ships, eager to learn about their technology. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "this victory is going to change everything. When word spreads that humans defeated the hegemony, every species in the galaxy will want to know how we did it." Jake nodded. The hegemony had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years, conquering every species they encountered. Now they had been defeated by humans who had only been in space for 40 years. The psychological impact would be enormous. But Jake also knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony had thousands more ships in their home territory, and they would not accept this defeat quietly. The aliens would come back with everything they had, and next time they would be prepared for human tricks. The real war was just starting. News of the hegemony defeat spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within days, every alien species knew that the mighty empire had lost an entire fleet to humans. Some species celebrated in secret, while others worried about what would happen next. In the hegemony capital system, Supreme Commander Vextar stood before the High Council and struggled to control his rage. The massive alien leader had ruled the empire for 200 years and never experienced defeat. His forearms gestured angrily as he spoke. "The humans destroyed our first fleet through trickery and cowardice," Vextar declared. "They used computer viruses instead of fighting with honor. This insult cannot stand. I will personally lead our remaining forces to Earth and turn that planet into molten rock." The council members shifted nervously in their seats. The First Fleet had been their most powerful force, and losing it to a species they had never heard of was shocking. But they knew that openly questioning Vextar was dangerous. "Supreme Commander," one council member said carefully, "perhaps we should study how the humans defeated our forces before launching another attack." Vextar's eyes glowed with fury. "Study? The humans got lucky once. It will not happen again. I am mobilizing every ship in the Empire. 50,000 vessels will reduce human space to ashes." Meanwhile, on Earth, President Catherine Wells met with Admiral Blake and other military leaders in the Situation Room beneath the Capitol building. The mood was tense despite their recent victory. "Intelligence reports confirm that the hegemony is preparing a massive counterattack," Blake reported. "They're pulling ships from garrison duties across their empire. We estimate they'll have 50,000 ships ready within 3 months." President Wells studied the holographic display showing hegemony territory. It was vast, covering hundreds of star systems. "We can't fight a defensive battle against those numbers. They'll overwhelm us no matter how clever we are." "Then we don't fight defensively," said Jake Morrison, who had been promoted to admiral after the victory. "We take the fight to them first." The room fell silent. The idea of humans attacking the hegemony in their own territory seemed impossible. Blake shook his head. "Jake, we barely have enough ships to defend Earth. How can we possibly attack an empire that spans half the galaxy?" "Because they won't expect it," Jake replied. "Every species they've conquered has waited passively for the hegemony to attack them. Nobody has ever struck first at their territory. They're not prepared for an aggressive defense." Amy Walsh, now serving as chief science advisor, supported Jake's idea. "The hegemony relies on fear and overwhelming force. If we can show the galaxy that they can be hurt in their own space, it might inspire other species to rebel." President Wells considered the proposal. It was incredibly risky, but doing nothing would certainly lead to Earth's destruction. "What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral Morrison?" "Operation Payback," Jake said. "Small groups of fast ships will strike at hegemony supply lines, shipyards, and communication centers. We'll use guerrilla tactics to disrupt their preparations. While avoiding major battles, we can't win." The plan was approved despite the risks. Within weeks, human ships were modified for long-range missions deep in enemy territory. captured hegemony technology was reverse-engineered to improve human weapons and defenses. Most importantly, several alien species that had suffered under hegemony rule began secretly providing intelligence and supplies. Captain Steve Thompson commanded the first strike mission. His ship, the Phoenix, was one of 3 vessels tasked with attacking a hegemony supply depot in the Rigel system. The depot provided fuel and ammunition to hundreds of enemy ships. "Remember, we hit hard and fast, then get out," Steve told his crew as they approached the target. "The whole point is to cause damage and disappear before they can respond." The attack went perfectly. Human ships appeared without warning, destroyed the supply depot and several enemy transports, then vanished into hyperspace before hegemony reinforcements could arrive. Similar attacks occurred across enemy territory as human strike teams targeted vulnerable installations. The hegemony military had never faced this kind of warfare. Their doctrine was based on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. When Admiral Morrison's ships attacked a convoy near the Vega system and then disappeared, the local hegemony commander didn't know how to respond. "Find them and destroy them," the alien commander ordered his subordinates. But the human ships were already light years away, striking another target. Commander Rachel Foster led a particularly daring mission against a hegemony shipyard in the Centauri region. Her small fleet arrived during a shift change when security was lighter than usual. They destroyed half-completed enemy warships and vital construction equipment before escaping. "This is impossible," the shipyard commander reported to his superiors. "The humans attacked us in the heart of our own territory. How did they even know where to find us?" The answer was that oppressed alien species were feeding information to human forces. The Zephyrians, whose homeworld had been conquered 50 years earlier, secretly transmitted shipping schedules and patrol routes. The Christek provided detailed maps of hegemony territory in exchange for human weapons. After 6 months of constant attacks, the hegemony war machine was breaking down. Supply lines that had operated smoothly for centuries were in chaos. Ship construction was behind schedule because key materials weren't arriving. Most importantly, discipline was breaking down as enemy commanders began to question orders and doubt their leaders. The breaking point came during the Battle of Wolf 359, where Admiral Morrison personally led an attack on a major hegemony fleet base. The humans arrived just as a convoy of enemy supply ships was docking, creating maximum confusion. "All ships, target the fuel storage tanks," Morrison ordered over the communication channel. "If we can set those off, the explosion will take out half their fleet." The attack was successful beyond their hopes. When the fuel tanks exploded, the chain reaction destroyed not only docked ships, but also the main command center. Hundreds of hegemony vessels were either destroyed or severely damaged. But the real victory was psychological. As news of the attack spread, rebellions broke out on a dozen conquered worlds. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly saw hope that the hegemony could be defeated. The Corvin uprising was the largest. These proud warrior people had been conquered 200 years earlier, but never stopped resisting. When they learned that humans were successfully attacking hegemony forces, they launched a coordinated rebellion across their entire star system. "The humans have shown us the way," declared Corvin resistance leader Thakmol. "The hegemony is not invincible. They can be beaten if we have the courage to fight." Similar rebellions erupted across hegemony space. The Empire's forces, already strained by human attacks on their supply lines, were forced to deal with uprisings on dozens of worlds. Ships that should have been preparing for the attack on Earth were instead fighting desperate battles against their own former slaves. Supreme Commander Vexitar watched his empire crumbling from his command ship and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. In less than a year, humans had turned his mighty empire into chaos. Rebellions were spreading faster than he could suppress them, and his own commanders were beginning to lose faith in victory. "Supreme Commander," his aide reported nervously, "the latest intelligence indicates that 17 more systems have declared independence. Our forces are spread too thin to respond to all the rebellions." Vextar stared at the strategic display, showing red indicators across his empire. Each red symbol represented a world in rebellion or under attack by human forces. The hegemony that had once seemed unshakable was falling apart. "The humans," he said quietly, "they have done something no other species managed in 1,000 years. They have given our slaves hope." The aide nodded reluctantly. "Should we continue with the planned attack on Earth, Supreme Commander?" Vextar considered the question. His original plan had been to destroy humanity completely. But now, he wasn't sure he had enough ships left to guarantee success. More importantly, attacking Earth would leave the hegemony homeworld defenseless against the spreading rebellions. "No," he decided. "Recall all forces to defend our core systems. We must restore order before we can think about revenge against the humans." But it was already too late. The damage was done, and the Empire was beyond saving. The humans had not only survived the hegemony's first attack, but had turned the entire galaxy against their oppressors. What had started as an invasion of Earth was becoming the liberation of the galaxy, and the humans were just getting started. The liberation of Kepler 442 system would become the defining moment that showed the galaxy who humans really were. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Liberty, and watched the tactical display with growing concern. Intelligence reports indicated that hegemony forces were using civilian populations as shields around their military installations. "Admiral, we could punch through their defenses in less than an hour," said Captain Steve Thompson from his ship, the Vengeance. "Our new weapons are more than capable of breaking their defensive line." Jake studied the sensor readings that showed millions of alien civilians trapped in the crossfire zone. The hegemony had deliberately positioned their weapons platforms near populated areas, knowing that most species would hesitate to attack and risk innocent lives. "Negative, Captain Thompson," Jake replied. "We don't win this war by becoming like them. All ships, prepare for Operation Lifeline. We're going in to rescue those civilians." The decision shocked many of his officers. They had been fighting the hegemony for over a year, losing friends and ships to an enemy that showed no mercy. The logical choice was to accept the civilian casualties and destroy the enemy quickly. But humans had a different definition of victory. Amy Walsh, now serving as Morrison's science advisor, coordinated the rescue operation from the Liberty's Science Bay. "I'm detecting approximately 2 million civilians in the danger zone," she reported. "Most are Altarian refugees who were relocated here after their homeworld was conquered." "How long do we have before hegemony reinforcements arrive?" Morrison asked. 6 hours at most," replied Lisa Carter from the navigation station. "Their nearest fleet base is in the Rigel system. 6 hours to evacuate 2 million people while fighting enemy forces was impossible by any normal calculation. But humans specialized in doing impossible things." "Tony Rodriguez to all engineering teams," came the voice of Morrison's former engineer, now commanding the rescue fleet's technical operations. "I'm transmitting modifications for your transport ships. We can increase passenger capacity by 300%, if we remove all non-essential equipment." The rescue operation began with coordinated attacks on hegemony defensive positions. to create safe corridors for civilian evacuation. Human ships darted between enemy weapons platforms, drawing fire away from the refugee camps below. Captain Rachel Foster led a squadron of fighters in the most dangerous part of the mission, flying low over the planet's surface to escort civilian transports. Her ships weaved between enemy ground installations while hegemony forces tried desperately to stop the evacuation. "This is insane," muttered one of Foster's pilots over the communication channel. "We're risking everything to save people we've never met." "That's what makes us different from the hegemony," Foster replied calmly. "They conquer through fear. We win by giving people hope. The evacuation lasted 18 hours instead of the planned 6. Human ships fought off 3 waves of hegemony reinforcements while continuing to ferry civilians to safety. When it was over, nearly 2 million alien refugees had been rescued, and the hegemony military installations were destroyed. The news of the Kepler 442 rescue spread across the galaxy within days. Species that had suffered under hegemony rule for generations suddenly understood that humans were different from every other military force they had encountered. They risked their own lives to save strangers, reported Zephyrian leader Cathara to the Underground Resistance Network. The humans could have destroyed the enemy quickly, but instead they chose to protect innocent lives. These are the allies we have been waiting for. This moment marked the transformation of the human campaign from simple revenge to something much larger: the liberation of the galaxy. Alien species that had remained neutral began actively supporting human forces. Intelligence networks that had been hidden for centuries emerged to provide detailed information about hegemony installations. General Nathan Cross led the ground, forces that liberated the Corvan homeworld 3 months later. The Corvans were fierce warriors who had never stopped fighting against their oppressors, even after 200 years of occupation. "General Cross," said Corvan resistance leader Thakmol as human transport ships landed on the planet's surface. "We have waited so long for this day. How can we ever repay you?" "By being free," Cross replied simply. "That's all we want. For every species to have the right to govern themselves." The liberation of the Corvan system was followed by similar victories across dozens of worlds. Human forces worked with local resistance groups to drive out hegemony garrisons and establish independent governments. Unlike the hegemony, which imposed uniform control over conquered territories, humans encouraged each species to develop their own political systems. Admiral Lisa Carter, promoted after Morrison was assigned to coordinate the overall liberation campaign, led the humanitarian efforts that followed each military victory. Her ships carried medical supplies, food, and technical experts to help rebuild worlds devastated by centuries of oppression. "The infrastructure damage is extensive," Carter reported after surveying the Altarian system. "The hegemony strip-mined 3 of their planets and relocated most of the population to work camps. It's going to take years to rebuild their civilization. Then, we'll help them for as long as it takes," Morrison replied from his headquarters ship. The liberation campaign was revealing the true scope of hegemony atrocities. Entire species had been driven to near extinction. Planets had been stripped of resources until they could barely support life. Cultural artifacts and historical records had been systematically destroyed. Dr. Amy Walsh documented these crimes for the historical record. Her reports would later become crucial evidence when the surviving hegemony leadership was put on trial for genocide. The hegemony didn't just conquer other species, Walsh explained in one of her reports. They tried to erase them completely. Languages were forbidden. Cultural practices were banned, and children were taken from their families to be raised as hegemony citizens. These discoveries only strengthened human resolve to see the war through to its conclusion. The Liberation campaign gained momentum as more species joined the growing alliance. Former enemies of each other united under human leadership to fight their common oppressor. The final assault on the hegemony homeworld began 2 years after the failed invasion of Earth. Morrison commanded a fleet of over 100,000 ships, representing 50 different species. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Supreme Commander Vex-Tar made his last stand in orbit around the hegemony capital planet. His remaining forces numbered less than 20,000 ships, but they were positioned around massive defensive installations that had protected the homeworld for 1,000 years. Citizens of the hegemony, Vex-Tar broadcast across all communication channels. The enemies of order and civilization have come to destroy us, but we will show them that the strong will always rule over the weak. The final battle lasted 3 days. Hegemony forces fought with desperate courage, knowing that defeat would mean the end of their empire. But they were outnumbered 5-1 by an alliance that had learned to fight as one unified force. The turning point came when several hegemony species switched sides during the battle. The Vorthon, who had been among the first species conquered by the Empire, suddenly turned their ships against their former masters. "We have suffered under hegemony rule for 800 years, announced Vorthon Fleet Commander Zendar. "Today we choose freedom over slavery." Other conquered species followed the Vorthon example. Within hours, half of the hegemony fleet was fighting against itself as species that had been forced to serve the Empire finally had a chance to rebel. Vex-Tar's command ship was surrounded by the end of the 3rd day. The Supreme Commander who had ruled through fear and violence for 2 centuries finally faced defeat. Morrison personally led the boarding party that captured the alien leader. "You have destroyed 1,000 years of galactic order," Vex-Tar said as human soldiers placed him under arrest. "Without the hegemony, the galaxy will fall into chaos and war." "Maybe," Morrison replied. "But at least it will be free to choose its own future." "That's better than the order you imposed through conquest and slavery." The surrender of Vex-Tar marked the official end of the hegemony. Across the galaxy, hegemony garrisons laid down their weapons as news of their leader's capture spread. Some die-hard loyalists continued fighting for months, but the empire that had dominated the galaxy for a millennium was finally dead. In the aftermath of victory, representatives from dozens of species gathered on Earth to discuss the future. The old Galactic Council had been compromised by centuries of appeasing the hegemony and no longer had the authority to govern. "We need a new system," declared President Catherine Wells as she addressed the assembled delegates. "One based on consent rather than conquest. One that protects the rights of all species, not just the strongest." The Galactic Federation was born from those discussions. Unlike the hegemony's forced unity, the new government would be voluntary. Species could maintain their independence while cooperating for mutual defense and trade. Not everyone supported the new system. Some former hegemony. 5 years after the fall of the hegemony, Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, the new capital of the Galactic Federation. Through the massive transparent walls, he could see ships from 50 different species working together in ways that would have been impossible during the old Empire's rule. A sleek Zephyrian cruiser docked next to a bulky Corvan transport, while human medical ships unloaded supplies for refugee camps on nearby planets. The sight still amazed Morrison, even after years of building this new alliance. "Admiral," said Amy Walsh as she joined him at the observation window. Amy now served as the Federation's chief science coordinator, managing research projects that involved dozens of species. "The latest reports from the integration committees are ready for your review." Morrison nodded, but didn't turn away from the window. "How many worlds are still dealing with post-war problems?" "About 30% of former hegemony territory," Amy replied honestly. "The damage from centuries of oppression runs deep. Some species lost so much of their original culture that they're struggling to rebuild their identity. Others are dealing with environmental damage that will take decades to repair." The liberation of the galaxy had been only the beginning of humanity's responsibilities. As the species that led the rebellion against the hegemony, humans found themselves in the position of helping rebuild an entire galactic civilization. President Catherine Wells had been clear about humanity's role in the new order. "We didn't fight this war to become the new rulers of the galaxy," she had declared during the First Federation Assembly. "We fought it so that every species could rule themselves. But good intentions didn't solve the practical problems of governing a galaxy. The Federation faced challenges that no government had ever dealt with before. How do you create unity among species that had been enemies for centuries? How do you rebuild economies that had been designed to serve the hegemony's war machine? How do you establish justice systems that work for beings with completely different concepts of law and morality?" Captain Steve Thompson, now serving as head of Federation peacekeeping forces, dealt with these problems every day. His ships patrolled disputed border areas where former hegemony species were still adjusting to the new reality. "Admiral Morrison," Thompson reported during their weekly briefing, "we've got another situation in the Rigel sector. 3 former hegemony client species are fighting over mining rights to an asteroid belt. Each group claims their old treaties with the Empire give them exclusive access." Morrison rubbed his forehead tiredly. Similar disputes were breaking out across the galaxy as species tried to reclaim territory and resources that had been taken from them during centuries of hegemony rule. "What's our position on this?" Morrison asked. "Officially, the Federation supports negotiated settlements based on historical claims and current needs," Thompson replied. "Unofficially, nobody can agree on what the historical claims actually are since the hegemony destroyed most of the original records." Ambassador Maria Santos, who had become the Federation's chief diplomat, spent most of her time mediating exactly these kinds of disputes. Her team of negotiators worked constantly to prevent old grievances from erupting into new wars. "The key is getting them to focus on the future instead of the past," Santos explained during a meeting with other Federation leaders. "Yes, the hegemony committed terrible crimes against all these species, but we can't undo history. We can only build something better going forward." Some Federation critics argued that humans were being too idealistic. Former hegemony Admiral Krelthos, now serving as a military advisor to the Federation, often expressed these concerns during strategy meetings. "With respect, Admiral Morrison," Krelthos said during one particularly heated discussion, "the hegemony maintained order through strength and clear hierarchy. Your Federation relies on voluntary cooperation and consensus building. What happens when species decide they don't want to cooperate anymore?" It was a fair question, and Morrison didn't have a perfect answer. The Federation's military was powerful enough to defend against external threats, but it wasn't designed to force member species to comply with Federation law. Everything depended on continued voluntary participation. The first real test of this system came when the Draknari Confederation announced they were withdrawing from the Federation. The Draknari had been one of the hegemony's most privileged client species, and they resented losing their special status in the new order. "We refuse to be governed by former slaves and primitive humans," declared Draknari leader Vashta during a public broadcast. "The Draknari people will forge our own destiny among the stars." The announcement created panic in the Federation government. If one major species could leave without consequences, others might follow. The careful alliance that had been built over 5 years could collapse within months. "We have to stop them," argued General Nathan Cross during an emergency meeting. "If we let the Draknari leave, it will encourage every other discontented species to think they can ignore Federation authority." "With what authority?" Morrison replied. "The whole point of the Federation is that membership is voluntary. The moment we start forcing species to stay, we become the new hegemony." President Wells supported Morrison's position, but she understood the political pressure they were facing. "We need to find a way to convince the Draknari to stay without using force. If we can't, then we need to show the galaxy that the Federation can survive even when members choose to leave." The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amy Walsh had been studying pre-hegemony historical records and discovered that the Draknari homeworld was facing a catastrophic environmental crisis that their leaders had been hiding from their own people. "Their primary food crop is failing due to soil contamination from centuries of industrial pollution," Walsh reported. "They're looking at potential famine within 2 years, but their pride won't let them ask for help." Morrison saw an opportunity. Instead of threatening the Draknari with military action, the Federation offered them a massive humanitarian aid package to address their environmental problems. The offer came with no political strings attached. The Draknari could accept the help and still leave the Federation if they chose. The gesture shocked the Draknari leadership. They had expected the Federation to either ignore their problems or use them as leverage for political concessions. Instead, humans and other Federation species offered genuine assistance to a people who had just insulted them publicly. "Why would you help us after we rejected your alliance?" asked Draknari leader Vashta during private negotiations with Ambassador Santos. "Because it's the right thing to do," Santos replied simply. "The Federation exists to help all species thrive, not just our members. If you still want to leave after we've helped solve your environmental crisis, that's your choice. But you shouldn't have to watch your people starve because of political disagreements." The Draknari eventually chose to remain in the Federation, but more importantly, the crisis established a precedent for how the new government would handle internal disputes. The Federation's strength came not from its ability to compel obedience, but from its commitment to principles that transcended political boundaries. Other challenges followed over the years. Former hegemony loyalists attempted several terrorist attacks against Federation installations. Economic disputes arose when some species tried to establish exclusive trade relationships that violated Federation commerce agreements. Border conflicts erupted between species that had been relocated during the hegemony era and wanted to return to their original homeworlds. Each crisis tested the Federation's commitment to peaceful resolution and voluntary cooperation. Not every problem was solved perfectly, and some species did eventually choose to leave the alliance. But the Federation survived and even grew stronger as it learned to adapt to new challenges. Captain Rachel Foster, now commanding the Federation's exploration fleet, led missions to contact species beyond the former hegemony territory. Many of these civilizations had isolated themselves centuries ago to avoid being conquered. Now they were cautiously emerging to see if the galaxy had really changed. "Admiral, Foster reported after returning from the Galactic Rim territories. "I've made contact with the Ethereal Collective. They've been monitoring our radio transmissions for years and want to establish formal relations with the Federation. These new alliances continue to strengthen the Federation's position as the dominant force for peace and stability in the galaxy." But Morrison never forgot that their success depended on maintaining the principles that had made the alliance possible in the first place. On the 10th anniversary of the hegemony's fall, Morrison gave a speech to the Federation Assembly that summed up humanity's philosophy of leadership. "10 years ago, we were just another species trying to survive in a hostile galaxy," he said to the assembled delegates. "Today, we're part of something much larger, a community of free peoples working together for the common good. We didn't achieve this through conquest or intimidation. We achieved it by proving that cooperation is stronger than coercion, that diversity is better than uniformity, and that freedom is worth fighting for."